So 4.3.3 says, how can I simplify with negatives? Simplifying with zero. In the previous lessons, you simplified and rewrote algebraic expressions. In this lesson, you're going to continue to explore various ways to make expressions simpler by finding parts of them that make them zero. Zero is a relative newcomer to the number system. Its first appearance was as a placeholder around 400 BC in Babylon. The ancient Greeks philosophized about whether zero is even a number. How can nothing be something? East Indian mathematicians are generally recognized as the first people to represent the quantity zero as a numeral and a number in its own right in about 600 AD. Zero now holds an important place in mathematics, both as a numeral, representing the absence of a quantity, and as a placeholder. Did you know that there is no year zero in the Gregorian calendar system, our current calendar system of 365 days in a year? Until the creation of zero, number systems began at 1. Consider the following questions as you work today. How can I create a zero? How can I rewrite this expression in the most efficient way? So 4-103 says concepts of zero. Zero is a special and unusual number. As you read above, it has an interesting history. What do you know about zero mathematically? The questions below will test your knowledge of zero. So there is questions here, Alpha through Foxtrot, and what you're going to do is you're going to read through these, and I'll read through them for you. And then you're going to pause the video, and you're going to write down the answers to those right here in your notebook. Okay, and then come back and we'll discuss these and have them written down before we move on. So the questions are, if two quantities are added and the sum is zero, what do you know about those quantities? In other words, this one here, the wording confused students just because of the terms that they use. So it says if two quantities or two numbers are added together and the sum or the answer is zero. So if two numbers are added and the answer is zero, what do you know about the two numbers? Bravo says, if you add zero to a number, how does the number change? Charlie says, if you multiply a number by zero, what do you know about the product? Delta asks, what is the opposite of zero? Echo, if three numbers have a product of zero, what do you know about at least one of those numbers? And lastly, Foxtrot says, is zero even or odd? So go ahead and pause the video right now and answer those questions. Hi, welcome back. So it's saying if for alpha, it says if two numbers are added together and the sum is zero, what do you know about the quantities? Now, usually what happens is the first thing a student will say, well, it's 0 and 0. And while that's true, that's not really where we're going with this. So if I have a number, let's say the number 5. So if I have 5, what would I need to add to it so that I get an answer or a sum of 0? 5 plus what gives me 0? Hopefully, you thought about our integer work and you recognize that that would need to be a negative 5. That 5 plus negative 5 equals 0. What's the relationship between these two numbers? They definitely have the same numeral. So while this is positive 5 and that's negative 5, they both have the same numeral. That's what this is called in there. But we have 5 and the opposite of 5. So these two are opposites. So what we know about the quantities is that they're opposites. So 5 is the opposite of negative 5, and negative 5 is the opposite of positive 5. Bravo says if you add 0 to a number, how does the number change? So 3 plus 0 is 3. The number doesn't change. And 0 is added. In fact, that's what we used when we did our integer work. We added 0 so that we had enough to take away. If you multiply a number by 0, what do you know about the product or the answer to a multiplication problem? Hopefully you know that when you multiply by 0, when I multiply by 0, my answer is 0. What's the opposite of 0? So we were looking at opposites just a moment ago. We had 5 and the opposite of 5 are negative 5. There's no such thing as negative 0 or positive 0 for that matter. It's just 0. So 0 doesn't have an opposite. It's just 0. If 3 numbers have a product of 0, what do you know about at least one of the numbers? This is the word that usually trips kids up, this one right here. So remember, we had it up here as part of those context clues, right? So down here, it doesn't change its meaning. So that means I have 3 numbers that are multiplied together and my answer is 0. What do I know about at least one of those numbers? One of the numbers is 0 to get a product of 0. And lastly, and this is the one that sometimes kids argue with me about, is 0 even or odd? Zero is even because it is divisible by 2. I can have no money and give it to my 2 sons, and they both get an equal share of $0. So the rule for divisibility by 2 is that it has to be, or for even, is it has to be divisible by 2, which it is. Some students also notice the pattern, which is important. That's one of our mathematical practices, is to notice the pattern that it alternates. But the reason why it alternates is because it's divisible by 2 and vice versa.